under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Do I have any public comment from the board?
I do. Just one comment. I want to thank everyone for all their involvement for the game show on Friday night. It was an incredible success, both attendance-wise and fundraising, and the kind of fun everybody had. I want to thank every single one of our sponsors, from the $10 donors all the way to the $1,000 donors. In the event, which had 16 teams, lots of auction raffles, 50-50 raffles, and all the prizes for the winning teams and Team Spirit Award. We raised just shy of $20,000 for the Boys and Girls Club. So wow. That was incredible, and it wouldn't happen without all the support of people in this community and all their associated social media as well, because we had donations all the way from California to Florida to New York from that. So it really is well appreciated and goes for a great cause. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to doing it again next winter. Thank you.
That must have been the biggest fundraiser ever.
Certainly the biggest one since I have been on the board that I remember, and that's been like 7 years. So I don't know if ones before it were larger. There may have been.
Congratulations.
I was at the town caucus last night. I'd like to congratulate those that were nominated. I must admit I'm a little disappointed in the turnout, but I would like to thank those who were there, especially those that agreed to run for an office. I continue to be disappointed in the lack of people who are willing to run for office in the town or to serve on the various committees in the town. And personally, I'd love to know what prevents people from getting involved. We have some committees that don't meet as often as others. We have committees that do all spectrums of things across the management of the town. The Robert's Rules of Order and the open meeting laws are not that difficult once you get to know them. And I really would like to know what keeps people from getting involved. But I would like to congratulate those who were there, especially those who agreed to run for an office. In addition, last week I went to the Worcester County Selectmen's Association in place of Mrs. Luck, who's our delegate, and in addition to meeting some of our fellow select people, the speaker was a Kirsten Shearer, who's the director of IT for the Division of Local Services, DLS. We get a lot of that material online and et cetera. And while the IT part of DLS is predominantly there to assist the financial operations in various towns, there was an incredible amount of data that she has available on different towns that could be cut several different ways, and she made it a point to say that her staff and herself are more than willing to help us look at numbers and data if we're ever doing a report or a survey and we want to put together a subset of certain towns that, in terms of population or other statistical data, she'd be happy to help us with that. So I think it's a good resource, and I have some of the handouts that I'd be more than willing to share.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment from the public? Please, Mr. Lincoln.
Hello, we're Pete and Debbie Lincoln from Hemlock Drive. We're also members of both the Historical Society and the Senior Center. And over the winter, with new leadership in each place, with Sue Doherty over the Senior Center and with Jen Sanderson at the Board of History, we've been trying to come up with some ideas to increase interest and attendance in those two areas. And we've come up with an event which we'd like to run by you, and hopefully you'll get some support. These two boards, as opposed to the boards you were just mentioning, Mr. Toll, have been extremely active, a lot of enthusiasm for trying to increase membership in events that haven't been so much so before. So this is what we have in mind.
So we'd like to propose an uptown stroll on May 21st from 10 to 3, involving the 4 organizations in the center of town. It would be the library, the Council on Aging, the Teen Center, and the Historical Society. We've checked with all of their boards, and they are behind us, and we would like to put an event together to encourage the townsfolk to come and see these wonderful gems that are right here.
And what we will have is an open house at each of those places for those 5 hours, fully staffed with every event we can possibly maintain. And in addition, we're going to try to have a raffle at each place, but not to raise money. It'll simply be to raise awareness by having a card that you fill out or get checked off at each of the 4 places and then dumped off, and at the end of the day, those raffles will be drawn from that part. We're hoping, too, that the area concerns, maybe some of you remember the first night we had in 2003, we opened the town at night to walk through the center and had various events, that maybe the various merchants would be involved. And we picked that particular day because that's the day of the town election when many townsfolk will be out and about and give them something else to do, and encourage them to come out and vote as well. And the Lions Club is having their roadblock that same time, which would aid people in getting across the traffic situation up on Mass Ave during the time when they're crossing over to go to the Historical Society. This is still in the planning. We've got a lot of other things we'd like to have happen, but like any event like this, publicity is what makes it work. And so we're hoping to get Channel 9 to do a spot we can put together, write a story up for the Ledger, and then hopefully you folks can make people aware of it as the time comes near, or maybe we can come back and amplify it somewhere, have people from the various organizations come and speak. But it's the kind of event I think the town needs more of, where various people, there's a lot of people in town that probably have never been in all 4 of these establishments and have missed a lot. And now that they're all so, I think, vibrant and coming to life with a lot of new blood and new ideas, this is something we hope would vitalize the spring. It's before Memorial Day vacation, and there shouldn't be snow by then.
So we hope you'll support us and give us lots of publicity and ideas and suggestions, and if anybody wants to come forward to help us out, we'd love to help.
Well, before I make a comment, I have to say that I feel like I'm expecting you to open an envelope, because I feel like the way you two have parlayed back and forth, it's like an award show. So like and the winner is. But anyway, that aside, I think it's a great idea, and I can't support it any more than I do. I would enthusiastically get behind that, and I think everything you said is exactly right. I think that all those places, I'm one of the few people, one of those minority people like yourselves who have been in all those areas, but I think they all could use more attention, and I think it's a great idea to do it when you're doing it, for the reasons you're doing it, and I certainly would be supportive in advertising and getting people out, and I think it's a wonderful idea personally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll all
you.
stroll together.
I also think it's an excellent idea, and we'll support you as much as we can. Just be sure to ask for anything you think you need from us. And maybe I'll get the volunteer booth set up somewhere along your trail.
Or in between.
Well, anything, like, for instance, they've had the farmers market is asked to join with the Historical Society on Sunday. Perhaps they could do it on that Saturday instead. They have music over there. And any other groups in town that would like to be part of it is just a town spirit sort of organization. And at the same time, get people an opportunity to see open houses at all 4 places. I mean, the library's open anyway that day, but the other 3 are not. So that it would be an opportunity to participate in the town.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for putting it together.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, our first current business item is a discussion on the financing of the pavement management plan, and our town manager and director of DPW will take us through that. Mr. Rodequins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Select board members, thanks for another opportunity to speak to you about the pavement management plan. What I'm about to say is going to be a general overview, and for all of you, I'm sure will unfortunately have some redundancy, but I'm hoping that we'll have some people out there that haven't heard it, or we'll attract people who want to know more about it, particularly because tonight's presentation comes with a financial component, which, aside from the question, when are we going to do my road, the next question is, how are we going to pay for it? So maybe we'll answer some of those questions, or at least we'll have an avenue of approach towards answering some of those questions tonight. The creation of the pavement management plan. I'd just like to skip down and give you that definition first before we go back up. The plan is a system which provides an objective way of programming roadway improvements with the goal of maximizing available resources and extending the life of the pavement management system, or of the pavement system. Little vanilla there. Let me tell you what the further goal of the plan is. To provide update to the board and to people and to our department, to provide updated, detailed information and approach what I consider to be total transparency of those people, those town officials, you as road managers, and myself as the department head, the town manager. I can think of few things in the town that are totally transparent, such as this. There'll be it's a list of calculations, prioritizations, some math formulas. It ends up with a prioritization of every road in town, an estimate of what it will cost, the lengths, the widths, and again, detailed information on what we call a pavement condition index, which is an actual foot by foot, mile by mile survey of each individual roadway. This was first done and developed in 2009. The board supported it. We had been looking for it for some time. The town manager kicked it off and we developed a plan all on paper in 2009. We knew at that time that every so many years we would have to reevaluate the roads, and we did so and updated the plan and finished it last year in 2015. What the pavement management system does is it establishes a baseline condition of the roadways, which we use to establish a list of prioritized improvement recommendations. These recommendations are based on two components. The roadway segments, and I say segments because some of the roadways are so long that we break them into segments. Say a Northfield Road, we can sort of gauge the amount of the road we can do either to the next intersection or to some space on that road or some point on that road where we know we can afford to get to with the available funds. So we typically will not, on a road like Northfield Road, Lancaster Ave, Leominster Road, prioritize the whole road as one long section. We just don't have the money. And what we do is we break the roadways into functional classes. They're categorized in a hierarchy according to how they're used. A higher priority is given to roads that carry higher volumes of traffic. And let me just jump to that first. As an example, they're categorized as main roads, which typically contain high volume traffic and either permits traffic flow from one main road to another main road, or from a state highway to a main road, or from a state highway to a main road to like a Townsend or a Leominster. An example of this kind of main road would be Lancaster Avenue. The second category is secondary main and or secondary road, and typically contains a little less traffic, but higher traffic than the other ones below it. In either a collector road or a local road with less volume than a main road, also acting as a connector between the main roads. I know this sounds a little, if you think of it sort of as a spider web. You have your main avenues, roads that circumvent the town or dissect the roads, and then you have roads that sort of connect the mains, and then you, which are less voluminous, and then you have collector roads, the third category. Again, a lower traffic volume, a lower amount of use than either the top two, but does permit traffic flow between main roads or secondary roads, and then gets us into our local areas. So you can see how this is sort of spreading out, till finally we have our local roads, and I have them over 1,000 feet and under 1,000 feet, but that's just information for me in the department. The roads have only 4 categories and have a weighting as such. The local roads are typically the lowest volume traffic and permits traffic flow from any of the above roads. It could be a subdivision road or from subdivision to subdivision. Those are our local roads. And, you know, you're going to hear a lot about that tonight, because those seem to be the roads that aren't getting addressed, much to the dismay of some people. Here's an example. If you don't see a particular road on here that you think should be here, remember, this is not all of them. This is just a representative sample of what we consider our main roads. Secondary mains, I'm not going to list them all out for you. Collector roads, you can see how they, not only do they decrease in linear footage, but you can see where they decrease in the volume of traffic. And then the local roads, of which there are many more, although less volume and less length. And then we've got even the shorter ones, but that will come under the category of local roads. So we have the roads separated into functional class. The other component of the formula is road defect or pavement condition index. So what we do is we go along each road and we visually address, or we categorize each defect in the road, defect for defect. It's very, very labor intensive, takes a lot of time. And the defects we look for, which I'll explain to you, are longitudinal cracks that go with the length of the road, utility cuts, raveling and shoveling, shoving, pushing. These won't mean anything to you till I get to the graphics. Trenches, and of course potholes. The random longitudinal cracks, as I said, you can see it sort of goes with the length of the road. Sometimes this is representative of when the road has been paved last, and it can at times be the paver joint, which opens up first, or it could be part of the subsurface construction of the road. At times we will now look at this and address it with a crack seal, either soon after it's paved to avoid further cracking, or this would be a road that over some period of time, instead of paving it, we would crack seal these joints so that water wouldn't get in and it would extend the life of the road until a point in time when we'd have to pave the whole thing. Utility cuts, I'm sure you recognize these. This could be a water service that needed to be replaced or installed. It could be a gas service that was leaking or was required to be put into the home. One thing to consider as we move through this, and we'll talk about this at a later time, is I'm hoping I'll have the support of the board and the town manager to put a moratorium on these roads once they're paved. We've always had sort of an informal can I say policy? Informal policy as to what we want to make sure that our cuts, our repairs are done before we pave the road. But we don't want to make, we want to make sure the other utilities, the water, the gas, electrical, underground, has in their mind that they're not allowed to do it for a number of years, be it 3, 4, or 5 years. And we do communicate with these utility companies, so they do have a chance to assess their utilities prior to the paving. At this point, what we do is, after so many years, we only allow emergency cuts. And it's difficult if somebody has a gas leak to tell them, no, they can't go in the road, or if their well fails and there's water in the street. This is the raveling and the shoving again. This occurs, we typically will install asphalt in 2 layers, And even if we do it in one, it's obviously sitting on top of another. We use an emulsion compound between the layers, but inevitably, because aggregate is not solid and not as impervious as some may think it is, water will get in and will separate from the top, will separate from the binder, and this indicates that the bond in that particular spot is failing. Naturally, left undone, left unpatched, you can just see this. It was spread and spread and crack and crack and keep moving. Main line trench. This is actually a photo of 2A, but it's a good indication of what a main line trench is. This picture was taken after we installed the forced sewer main, the water main, down to the trailer park area. Went right down 2A. It's a linear joint, and pavement usually will crack after this, but it's done. We asked the state in this particular case to overlay the whole road. It wasn't in their budget to do so. So this is what you'll see as a new utility is installed in any major roadway. Then the king of them all, the pothole. I don't know if I even have to explain what potholes are at this point. And rutting. This is an unusual defect. This has to do specifically with subsurface conditions in our town of Lunenburg. As I've excavated through the town for many, many years, here and there's only really 2 areas in Lunenburg that have a gravel subbase. And if when roads were built many, many years ago, the appropriate subsurface material wasn't installed, then the silt and clay, which is typically under our roadways, will take a pounding right in the wheel rut, where the wheels go time and time and time and time again, and it becomes simple physics. It's going to depress in that area, and closest to the edge, the force down in a vertical pressure will just push out to the right and the left. And since it's not going to move too much into the middle because of the resistance, it will push out to the right or push out to the curb. And that's when you'll see that's why you see a lot of cracking towards the edges of the roadways. Then the final defect, which is really, this is called spider webbing or alligator cracks. This is when there's really nothing left. I mean, there isn't anything that we can do here that makes any sense unless the pothole is very deep. But this is just a waste of money to try and do anything here aside from a mill and an overlay or pavement or paving or leveling and paving or roadway reconstruction. There are some roads that look like that, and they're in awful shape, and maybe what we're going to talk about tonight will allow us to do some work on those roadways. What I do want to leave you with, as I turn this over to the town manager, who will give a presentation on the financial component of it, is that the pavement management plan in 2009 and in 2015 did exactly what it was supposed to do. It prioritized the roads based on these things that I've explained tonight, estimated the cost, and gave us a multi-page list of how we should be doing our work, because we don't do worse first. We don't pave those roads like years ago that are owned by the squeaky wheels and have somebody's ear and those get paved. But what we do is follow the plan that was accepted by this board and previous boards, which puts money, and most of our money, if not all of our money, towards our main roads and our collector roads to some point. So it estimates the cost. It gives you a defect value relative to all the defect values in town, and gives you a priority. Unfortunately, the best plan in the world won't address the funding. It only tells you what it's going to cost. It isn't going to tell you how we're going to get that kind of money. For that information, I'm going to turn it over to the town manager, Mrs. LaFleur.
Thank you, Jack. So the original plan had a formula, and that formula was generated by providing a weighted rating for each road segment based on just the classification and the defects. So Jack went through the classification, roadway classification and defects, and that's what we used for the original plan. This weighted rating was then used to determine the prioritization of the projects, and we used this plan for fiscal years 10 through 15. And I'll go through in the next slide some of the projects that we did during that time. We did a significant amount of work during that time, but we're really only spending about $650,000 a year on average, and we need to spend about $1 million to $1.2 million. So $1.2 million. So we're behind where we need to spend. In fiscal year, you can see from the chart that in our operating budget, we only allocated $70,000. We brought that up to about $240,000, and then we add that to the Chapter 90 funding, which is the funding that we receive from the state on an annual basis for road work, and you can see that we're getting about $400,000, $425,000 a year, with the exception of 2015. That was the year that Governor Baker took office, and prior to him taking office, former governor had included some additional funding in the state budget in Chapter 90 that didn't get released, and Governor Baker did release it. That was a campaign promise that he made, and he did release it. So in last fiscal year, we received about $200,000 more than we had been receiving, and we also received some additional aid in 14 and 15. The projects that we've completed between 2010 and the beginning through this fiscal year, they're detailed on this slide. These are all major roads. They're main roads. They're secondary main roads. None of these are, or essentially none of these are local roads. And the reason that we've only been working on the main roads is because of the formula that we used, where we only took into consideration the classification of the road and the defect of the road. So as Jack mentioned, last year we undertook a process to update the plan, and we added in an additional factor. So each of the roadway segments were re-inspected last year to update the data that was collected in 2009. Based on the new inspection data, we created a pavement condition index. And that index expresses the relative condition of each roadway on a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being the worst. The PCI is used to estimate the appropriate repair treatment for each roadway. So then we take the roadway and we weight the condition and the functional classification to develop a prioritized list of repairs. So similar to the original methodology, we used that initial methodology, but then we added in the PCI to come up with a scale, a new way to rate the roads on a scale of 30 being the highest, back to 0. Maybe I'll jump here. The reason we took the roadway condition into account is because you can see from this slide that for every dollar that we spend doing routine maintenance, if we're not spending it there, you can see the downward slope, that it costs more if you're spending money instead of on routine maintenance, on preventative maintenance, then on rehabilitation, and finally reconstruction. So every dollar that you spend at the routine maintenance stage, if you delayed that, you would be spending $5 to $8, so 5 to 8 times as much if you waited until you needed to do reconstruction. So we used, in order to calculate the costs that I'll talk about in a minute, we used the current bid that we have for asphalt. We do on an annual, or actually probably once every 2 years, we bid out asphalt because we do a lot of our work in-house. So we do have a need to have an on-call contract for asphalt. So what we did was we took all of the existing conditions and we we presented it in two different charts. And if you've seen these charts before, the last time we talked about this. So first we looked at the repair method, reconstruction, mill level and overlay, crack seal, and deferred maintenance. This graph identifies the amount of the length that of roadway in each of the categories, the cost for each of those, the percent of length as a percent of whole, the cost as a percent of whole, or the cost per mile. So you can see that if you're talking about a repair of a crack seal, we're looking at an average cost of $13,900 per mile versus $190,000 to do mill level and overlay versus $317,000 to do reconstruction. I would mention that all of these costs represent or include a 20% contingency in the estimate, so we feel that we have a good cushion, because you can have a good idea of what you're going to encounter in the field, but you can't exactly be sure. So all of the costs in total are $9 million. And if the town spent $9 million, in theory, we would bring everything up to a pavement condition index of 100. Now, we're not going to do that, but this just represents what that cost would be. So just to reiterate, as shown on the previous table, as roadways deteriorate further, the cost per mile for rehabilitation increases. This is why it's important not to do all of the worst roads first, but to have a blend of treatments, because you don't want to just be dealing with reconstruction. If we are able to do some crack sealing, that makes sense too. So the next slide looks at or separates them by functional category. So as I mentioned, most of the work that we've been doing in the past is with our main roads. And if you look at main roads, they represent 22.1 miles of roadway, and the average PCI is 70. And it's the highest because that's where we're spending our money right now. We still have an additional $2.1 million worth of work to do if we were to bring all of those roads up to a PCI of 100. Secondary main, we just have one secondary main, which is Arbor Street, so I'll kind of skip over that because that skews that category. Secondary roads, we're spending less money there, and the average PCI is 66, so it's not too bad. We have about $1.5 million worth of work to do there. You drop down to collectors, the average PCI is 58, and there's just under $2 million worth of work. But then you drop down to locals, where we're essentially spending none of our money and have not for the last 5 or 6 years. The average PCI is 53. We have 27.9 miles in this category and $3.16 million. Okay, so just to reiterate, the main roads are about 25% of our roadway system. They account for about 25% of the cost if you were to bring everything up to 100. The main roads are in good condition with an average PCI of 70, and then I mentioned Arbor Street has a PCI of 36, so that's obviously very poor. Our secondary roads, these are represent 40% of the roadways. They represent slightly less than 40% of the repair need. The average PCI is 66 for secondaries and 58 for collectors. And then locals are 32% of the roadway, 35% of the repair costs, and with an average PCI of 53. So the board, as you all know, but for the benefit of the public, the board has been working on funding of a pavement management plan for a number of months now, doing so in the capacity of road commissioners. So that is a, maybe the public doesn't necessarily know, but the Board of Selectmen are the commissioners of roads within the town of Lunenburg. You identified that a long-term funding strategy needed to be developed. We had talked about maintaining an average PCI of 70, but that consideration needed to be given to provide regular funding for local roads, and that a sustainable funding plan be put in place that regularly and routinely addresses all of the roadway maintenance needs. We talked about the fact that the current level of spending will not achieve the maintenance goals, as most of the funding is going to main and secondary roads, leaving little left for the local roads. And as you know, most of the complaints that we receive are from residents who are living on a local road. So we undertook the process to develop a long-term funding strategy, noting that as the condition of a roadway worsens, the cost to bring it up back to a state of good repair increases dramatically. That if only the worst roadways are repaired first, roads that can be rehabilitated more economically now will be more expensive to repair if left to deteriorate further. And that an effective pavement management plan applies a blend of repair strategies to optimally distribute the available funds. Again, I think this graph is really helpful. The more you can spend early on in maintenance, the better bang you get. So our current funding for fiscal 16, we fund this program through our operating budget and through Chapter 90, which again is state aid. So in fiscal 16, our operating budget has $250,000 in it, and we received a Chapter 90 allocation of $416,000. So we have about $666,000, and 666, that's a bad number. I really wanted to make it something else. So we know we need to do something because we can't have 666. And you'll see I did something, I rounded it up here so we didn't have to talk about it again. But so as I mentioned, the annual cost to meet the goal is a spending level of about $1 million to $1.2 million per year. Our current level of spending, $667,000. So we have a deficit of about $333,000, very significant. Our current level of spending is barely sufficient to address the main, the secondary mains, and some secondaries and collectors, but it's insufficient to address the local roads. And again, the board requested that we come up with a plan that's going to have a significant impact in the short term. So for local roads, because these are the roads that aren't receiving any funding under the current plan, there are 117 road segments that are identified as local, with 58 of them, or about 50%, at a PCI of 70 or less. The cost to improve these 58 segments is about $3.1 million. There are another 41 segments of local roads that have a PCI of 71 to 89, and they have an associated improvement cost of $257,000. And then we have 18 segments with a PCI of 90 or higher with no improvement costs. So the cost to make all improvements to local roads, and I included everything from a PCI of 89 and below because we're looking at a multi-year plan. So the ones that are between 71 and 89, especially the ones closer to 70, would fall below 70. And because it was such a nominal amount when you add it, I included it here. So this is about $3.4 million in maintenance costs. And we talked, the last time that we met in work session, we talked about potential stormwater improvement needs. So that's what we took a look at since the last time we talked. And we estimated stormwater improvement needs at an additional $510,000. And the way that we came to that is we're assuming that 600 of the town's 1,100 catch basins are included in the proposed work area, and the average maintenance cost associated with the catch basins is $850. The construction of swales and seeding can be completed with the already calculated costs on a limited basis. If we get into something significant, then we're going to have to make some adjustments. But remember, I mentioned that we have a 20% contingency to account for increases in asphalt prices, unforeseen conditions, and then any stormwater improvements that would be over and above what we expect to encounter if we were to go forward with this project. So we're looking at total project costs of $3.9 million. So what we're requesting is that the board support asking the voters for a debt exclusion. This is a one-time request to provide funding infusion to the plan. And honestly, if we could be asking for this at a different time, I wish we could, because we're all very aware of the request that was made to the voters and overwhelmingly supported for the school. This would be an additional request. If there was some other way to do this, I would gladly bring that forth, but I'm not seeing that. So what we are presenting is that the work on these local roads would be completed over a 3 to 4 year period, so between fiscal 17 and fiscal 20, and it would be financed over a 7-year period, fiscal 18 to fiscal 24. And then thereafter, funding for maintenance, all roadway maintenance would be included within the operating budget, and I should make a note, the operating budget plus Chapter 90. So what we need is an infusion to get us out of the hole that we are in with roadway work, specifically for local roads, but then we would be looking to fund it within the budget. And the way that I would propose to do that is that we increase the operating budget appropriation by $50,000 per year until we get to $1 million or $1.2 million available per year. And where I would propose that $50,000 would come from would be that the first $50,000 of motor vehicle excise tax be devoted to increasing the operating budget funding beginning in fiscal 2018. And I would also put forth that the board, or suggest that the board commit to that in a financial policy, so that the voters, if they were to approve this debt exclusion, that they would have the assurance that this would be the one time that we ask for money for roads, and that we would take care of it within the budget thereafter. And just as a point of reference, the current annual growth in motor vehicle excise tax is about $50,000. But regardless of whether it's 50,000, 100,000, or it's 5,000, the first 50,000 of motor vehicle excise be dedicated to roadway maintenance. And then when we get to, we'll continue to look at this, but when we get to $1 million to $1.2 million, or $1.2 million, we'll look at it again to make sure that that's an adequate number. And if it is, maybe we look at reducing the reliance on motor vehicle excise tax only to what we expect the inflation would be for the cost of the work to be done in the future. So this is a look at the funding scenario. If we were to request approval for $3,910,000 over a term of 7 years, the I think probably the most important thing is the impact to the average single-family home in fiscal 16, and I use fiscal 16 as a base. I held it constant at 16. It's not inflated. But the cost to the average home would be about $145 per year for the first year, and then decreasing down to $123 in year 7. So between the cost would be between $123 per year and $145 per year for 7 years, on a quarterly basis, $30 to $35 a quarter. So I think I'm going to jump here first before I conclude. This is a graph that shows our current exempt debt plus the proposed. So the blue is what we currently have as voter authorized exempt debt, and the red would be the proposed project. Maybe more importantly, looking at the average tax bill just for exempt debt. So currently, or for fiscal 17, about $600 of the average tax bill would go for exempt debt, based on what has already been authorized. And then in fiscal 2018, it would jump up $145, and then it would come down pretty significantly in fiscal 2023. It would start coming down 2024. 2024 is when the primary school and the public safety building, when that debt service is retired. 2026 then is when the library debt service is retired. So then just to go back to summarize, pavement management program is an inventory of each roadway under the town's jurisdiction. Based upon pavement distress, the distresses observed in the field, a PCI is calculated from 0 to 100, with 0 being the worst. The index is then weighted by the roadway's functional classification to develop a priority index, which is on a scale of 30 to 0, with 30 being the highest priority. The current policy of weighting local streets lowest, and instead allocating funds to main roads and collectors, doesn't adequately address the needs of residents, especially those who live on local roads. The PCI and other inventory data are used to determine the appropriate treatment for the roadway. Based upon the determined treatment, an approximate cost can be calculated. We've used our current on-call asphalt contract to determine the price of asphalt. We've included a 20% contingency to be safe to be able to deal with field conditions that might be different than what we expect. Both a commitment to increase the annual spending and a one-time infusion through a debt exemption is needed to get the plan back on track, or back on a sustainable track. And the cost for the proposed debt exclusion in year 1 to the average single-family home is $145 per year. So that's the end of that presentation, and either Jack or I would be happy to answer questions.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, on the average tax bill exempt debt, that's everything that includes the middle, high school, just everything that we owe?
Yes, everything that has been authorized as exempt debt, including the big school project.
Thank you.
Say that again. What was your question exactly?
Does this include all of the exempt debt?
What is
Including the
this?
middle
What do you
high
mean
school.
this?
What's on the chart right now?
Oh, okay, that graph. I didn't see what you were pointing to. Okay.
So the only thing that has been authorized that is not yet included is the remaining amount for the school project, which could be up to about $5 million, but we won't know that until the project is finished, until the MSBA audits. And we won't be doing that final borrowing until after that's occurred. So it's probably closer to $2 million, but it could be as high as 5 million that's not included.
Oh, okay. So what would the impact of that be if it was 5 million?
Well, if it was, so this model is for 4 million, $145 a year for 4 million. So if it was 100% town financed and it was, in that range, we're looking at $145 or so. Additional, yeah.
I would just like to remind the board that in our workshop discussions and when we talked about pavement management as one of our major goals, all along we've said as exempt debt was reduced, that was going to be our first priority to use that money, or to at least ask the town to use that money, was for pavement management. And I think this plan in a lot of ways just speeds up the timetable to allow us to spend the money more wisely according to what was represented.
That's a really good point, because it would be wonderful if we could wait until 2024. But if we do, the cost is going to be significantly more. And I don't know that point was made quite that way, so I think that's a good point to make.
And that was, excuse me, that was the point I was going to make, is that yes, we could wait, but waiting is only going to cost us more in the long run. So it makes sense to bring this forward now. I think it's a good plan. I think it will address all of the main roads as well as the local roads and bring us up to a level that we can maintain. And I truly hope that this board and the taxpayers support it, because I think it's a responsible plan. I think it's a minimal impact to the homeowners. If you look at $145 for everyone, I think to have all of our roads be at a pavement management index of 70 is absolutely attainable. And I think that you guys have done a fantastic job of putting this plan together, and I hope that we go forward with it this year.
So one piece of information that you've seen, but it wasn't part of this presentation, is the 2 maps. We have 2 maps with the roadways, all of the roadways in town, color-coded, either based on their functional class or on their PCI. And so when we put this up on the website, we'll make sure to include those maps so people can see if they want to look at their road and say, oh, that's what a 50 looks like. It's easy. Those are great tools as well.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Alonso.
So I would say that first of all, I want to thank the DPW director and the town manager for putting the plan together, as was already said. I think we've been looking at this as a board and as a town for many years, and I certainly think that this addresses the problems and the issues facing us, either never getting some roads done or waiting forever to do it and making the cost higher, and therefore always catching up to a goal we can never achieve. I think this achieves it in a very good and positive way. I do have one question, and that is if you could just review, I didn't really follow the $50,000 a year, how you're going to take that from motor vehicle excise to get eventually to the 1 million out of the operating budget.
So the suggestion would be that we dedicate $50,000 of that revenue stream to road improvements. Right now, the growth in that is about $50,000. It's been very consistent year after year. So while we would take the first 50 beginning in fiscal 18 is when we would be looking at this. I don't necessarily see that is going to take away existing funding from existing programs, because I do see it as the growth in that revenue stream. But if it's not, then we would need to make some adjustment somewhere, or hopefully some other revenue, there would be some growth to offset that.
So if I understand it correctly, so the first year you would take $50,000 from that. The next year you'd take $100,000 from that, because it's cumulative,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. I have no problem with that. I just wanted to understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the alternatives is to dedicate something that would be definitely recurring, which would be whatever new growth is. So the first $50,000 of new growth be appropriated to that. But that's certainly a minor detail of
Yeah.
how we do that. I just wanted the clarification.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So I mentioned the motor vehicle excise tax because most people assume that even 100% of motor vehicle excise tax gets set aside in local budgets for roadway work, and that's not the case. But if I did think about new growth. New growth is fine as well. Either one. I just think committing to something in a written policy is important, is an important component of this project.
I think the important part to realize is that if we go forward with this, and I certainly encourage the town to do it, that it is definitely hinging on the fact that we need to increase and maintain the maintenance part so that we don't get in this situation again. That maintaining, as we found out through obviously our own local experience, but certainly from statistics and working with the engineering firms, that road maintenance really prolongs the life, and that's where the less money goes to do crack sealing and everything than allowing everything to get to the point where now you're looking at major repairs.
Yeah, while I support the financing of this and to look at it at this point in time, and I encourage the town to strongly consider it, I do have some technical qualities, questions that kind of go to what Mr. Alonso said. One is, and everybody talks about their own street, so I'm going to do the same thing, but it seems like the pieces of the road that continually break down are the ones that are also continually full of puddles. And it would seem to me that it goes hand in hand with drainage in order to maintain the roads. And I know we got a big stormwater program going on, but at the same time, just normal drainage is also something that I'd want to consider, and it would be important. I guess the question is, and that's just one example, the question to me is, if we're going to spend this kind of money and get the roads to the condition we want them in, how can we guarantee we're going to keep them there as best we can, other than normal wear and tear?
Well, you've answered part of your own question in terms of the drainage. Even now, with the funds that we have, the limited funds, the first thing we do is look at existing drainage, if there is any. A lot of the drainage in town is what's called country drainage. There are few catch basins, and a lot of the water goes to low points and out into the road. But indeed, particularly in the area that you speak of, there are lots of catch basins. And what brings to mind, though, is when you say the puddles. Sure, the puddles hold water, the water compresses, breaks the aggregate together. As important as the drainage is, and as limited as it may be in certain places, as important as that is the profile of the roadway. Roadways are supposed to be built with a crown, shedding the water. When I showed you those graphics of the defects, when you saw the rutting, what's happening in places, in particular places like Hickory Hills and other places that haven't been addressed at all, is that these depressions get lower and lower and lower and hold more water and hold more water. Then there's holes in the depressions and the water can't get out. So yes, absolutely. We have an amount of money in there to address the drainage and other stormwater issues. We have a contingency. Some of that will go to drainage. And as important, as I said, is to rebuild the profile of the road. We're just not going to slap an inch or a couple inches on it. But in a road such as that, we would fill those ruts and reprofile the road and put a crown in it. So, will there be puddles down the way? 10, 12, 15 years, I suppose. But initially, and to answer your question, is that we'll reprofile the road to shed the water, and we'll look at each drainage structure, cross pipe, and see perhaps even if we shouldn't add another, although we're more likely to add swales and grassy areas and gardens such as that in the low spots.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we talked about in discussing this was coordination with utilities. In addition to stormwater was the gas company, and I contacted the Lunenburg Water District, so that by having the map available and a proposed plan, if there is a utility need to go through, that maybe they're ready next year instead of this year, you can move things back and forth. The same thing with stormwater. The task force has started talking about there's some roads where you're not going to do anything, so you can pave it. Other parts, that it's an issue, and so therefore it may get moved around within the plan. So I appreciate the fact that there would be a list, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do lockstep one through the other to deal with that. I'd also want to support this plan. It's part of the balancing of the operating and the capital needs. I think in the past, going back many years, that when there was a tough year, the first thing the town cut was capital. That's the easiest thing to cut, but that's often the worst thing to do because later on, especially when we had many years of downturn, we ended up cutting capital and then cutting operating. We got to the place where we didn't want to get to, but we had to, and then we had to dig out of capital. The capital planning process right now is doing great, and I would only support this with the solution that Mrs. LaFleur has talked about, which is that to build it into the operating budget with a policy, with numbers and percentages, whatever we have, I think that would go to continue to maintain our bonding effort as well by saying we need to maintain our capital and infrastructure.
Good points, all.
Also, I wonder if this isn't the right time to take a look at, all of your quotes, et cetera, from our current supplier. Is this the right time to put it out to bids, ask for outsourcing, do some homework in terms of is there a way? I know I did a small amount of research on the town of Westford, and they do chip seal as a fairly major portion of their pavement management system, not on the primary roads, but on the others. Is this the right time to look at the technology and just see if we're getting the most bang for our buck at the same time, especially if we're making a large commitment?
Absolutely. In fact, it's past that time. Okay. We've already, we explore all those possibilities: micro paving, chip seal, cold planing in place where they put it through the machine and just lay it right down. In terms of our provider, our vendor, had conversations with him 2 or 3 times at least over the period of winter, looking at the prices of oil and the price of the asphalt and the aggregate, and trying to get an approach towards what he might be bidding. I mean, we're not colluding in any way, but certainly we have an idea as what you're going to bid in the spring. This is the final year. June 30 will be the final day of our 3-year contract, which we're able to do as a municipality. I've been assured that it's very likely. What sort of confidence do you have in that? As much confidence as he can provide that we'll be right around the same place, and even he said perhaps a little lower. So he said you can, except for something catastrophic, you can figure your price to be right about where it is now.
It just would seem to me with petroleum costs coming down and a fairly large bid, we might be able to get some competition into the
from our local vendor.
From all vendors.
Yeah, I think that'd be pretty difficult to beat, being inhabitants of Lunenburg. But certainly we go through the procurement process. We do everything just the way we're supposed to do, and everyone's invited to bid. Being in town, I believe if you look at the history of the bid, I think we do get a little bit of the hometown discount. In 21 years of bidding, that vendor has only lost a bid once. It was the second year in. But yes, I mean, it's out there. We'll take the low bid. We're required to, and we will.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
So I just have one thing to mention. The next step, if you choose to move forward, would be to authorize a question to be put on the ballot. If you are so inclined, we would like to bring that back to you next week so we can get that straightened out. The town clerk would appreciate knowing if she needs to be adding something to the ballot. So
should we do that in the form of a formal motion tonight, or should we wait until next week?
I will. It's not on the agenda to vote on that tonight.
Okay.
As long as there's no
opposition. We can put it on the warrant as an article, but then we have to add it as a ballot item. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we would, we have plenty of time to do that next week. We would actually have the question drafted for you, and you could vote the wording of the question.
Well, personally, I'm certainly in favor of putting it on the warrant and the ballot, as I think the majority of the board is.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to our next current business, which is a review of the draft of the annual town meeting warrant. So we'll take 2 minutes while Mrs. LaFleur gets a chance to join us.
I have a question. Stormwater for state roads. As I was driving on Route 2 today in the rain and wondering where their water is going, are they subject to the same regulations as cities and towns are?
You know, I don't know, because when I was at the MPO meeting the other
Somebody
day
knows.
with Mass Department of Transportation, I asked the Mass Department of Transportation guy what they were doing about MS4, and he said, "Is that stormwater?" So he didn't have much familiarity with it.
It's a timely question, because I was just...
Mr. Bernie.
But the state of Massachusetts is required to file their own MS4 permit.
Okay.
And I think that DOT is fairly segmented, so the people who do that might not necessarily communicate as well with the administrators who are out on the road, but they do hold an MS4 permit, whether they are, leading the way in innovative maintenance of their stormwater system. I would say is probably not, but they do have it. They are required to file it and do, minimal compliances as everybody else tries to.
I know that when they built I-190, that was the most expensive road per mile because of the environmental remediation.
I was just going to say that I actually brought this up at the last month's MPO meeting, and I asked that question, and Arthur Frost from DOT actually said that it mentioned 190, and also mentioned that the numbers of many projects have gone up significantly because of the filter swales and grass swales that are being put in to accommodate stormwater. So the answer to that question is yes, it is taken into consideration for roadways.
Because that'll certainly go to Route 2A. A lot of our stormwater goes to it, or it goes to ours, and so certainly looking for a solution with the state as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think our intention on the next item is to go through the town meeting articles with the understanding that we're going to go through them at perhaps greater depth next week as well. All right. You want to?
So the warrant for the annual town meeting is open until Thursday, March 24th at 6 p.m. At this point, we think we've received most of the warrant articles that will be coming in, particularly the ones from the different departments. There are 35 in total. As the chair mentioned, I think we can take a number of these up at the meeting next week, but just to review what we have, the first 6 are the annual reauthorizations of revolving funds. Article 7 is to hear reports, and we expect that we will have a report on the decommissioning of the high school there. 8, it would be payment of prior year expenses. We don't have any to date, but we will update you on that next week. Article 9 would be the current year budget adjustment article. 10 is another budget adjustment article, but to transfer some money to set aside to do the market analysis of the municipal buildings as requested by the Building Reuse Committee. I think we'll put that in a separate article, even though we're going to fund it through a budget adjustment, just so it's separate for the record. Articles 11, 12, and 13 are settlements of collective bargaining agreements. At this point in time, there's ratification of only one of the 3. I'm hoping that we'll have at least 2 of the 3 in time for town meeting, and if we're lucky, all 3.
Is the firefighters the one we have?
Yes, it is. Article 14 is the fiscal 17 capital improvements plan. 15 is the fiscal 17 operating budget. Article 16 is a request from the Personnel Committee to authorize a cost of living adjustment for non-union employees. Article 17 would be the transfer to the stabilization fund to maintain the 5% balance in the account as a result of what we hope will be the adoption of the fiscal 17 budget. And then Articles 18, 19, and 20 are the fiscal year budgets for each of the enterprise funds, sewer, solid waste, and the water department. 21 will be a request to appropriate a bond premium and rescind borrowing authorization for the middle school, high school project. You might recall we did this once before. When we receive a bond premium through the financing, we have the option to either amortize the bond premium over the life of the bonds, or we can just take it up front and use it to fund the project and then rescind the same amount from the authorization. So we did that at least once before. Article 22 is to accept a Chapter 44, Section 53, F and 3/4 of Mass General Law to establish a PEG access channel, access and cable-related fund. So this is a change in Mass General Law which requires us to adopt this and set the license fee that we get from the cable company to set it aside in an account authorized under 4453 F and 3/4. So really not really what we're different than what we're doing, but just different to comply with Mass General Law. And then Article 23 actually requires the appropriation of a budget. So in past years, up until last year, the budget was just adopted by PAC and put into effect. Last year, it was presented under Article 7 here reports, but there was no formal action taken because there was none needed. But now with the change in state law, PAC has to have a budget adopted by town meeting, just like every other department in town. Articles 24 and 25 are from the school committee. The first requesting transfer of the Brooks House from the school committee to the custody of the Board of Selectmen. And then 25 requesting transfer from the school committee to the selectmen of the T.C. Passios Elementary School building. 26 is granting a permanent easement along town right-of-way at 1134 Northfield Road. This item came before you. You already granted a license, and that license, the property owner is requesting that the license be approved as a permanent easement by town meeting. Article 27 is what we just talked about, which would authorize the wording's probably not quite right here, but this would authorize the expenditure of that $3.9 million for roadway projects, subject to a debt authorization at the ballot. Article 28 is a petition article to request a rezoning from recreational to Residence A at 1026 Northfield Road. If you're familiar with this property, the lot at 1026 Northfield Road is actually separated into one lot, has two different zonings. So originally, there was one owner of the lot at 1026 Northfield, and then the owner of the golf course. So this is next to the golf course. And the lot at 1026 Northfield was sold, but it has two different zonings. And when it was rezoned, it was under one ownership, and it didn't follow the lot lines, it followed other lines. So this is a request to rezone. Article 29 is a request to authorize the selectmen to negotiate a long-term contract for a cell tower at the existing turf field, and also to allow utility easements through school property. So the school committee has already approved the request for the easements, and this is something I think we probably can talk about next week, but this cell tower would replace an existing lighting tower. There's an existing lighting tower at that field, which is about 60 feet in height. This is a request to replace it with a cell tower that's about 75 feet in height that would still carry all of the lights on it, but it would also have space for cell services. And there is obviously a revenue stream that comes with this, and we're looking to dedicate that revenue stream to help offset the cost of the replacement of the turf field on an ongoing basis. 30 is really a placeholder right now, and this would be request to grant permission to the Board of Selectmen to negotiate a long-term lease to locate a Doppler radar tower in town. Again, just a placeholder, something that is at the very beginning stages, and likely more a fall town meeting request than an annual town meeting request. 31 is to amend the Architectural Preservation District bylaw wording and to amend the associated map. Article 32, amend the protective bylaw, and this is a placeholder for parking and site plan review coming from the planning board. We're still waiting for the exact wording on that. Article 33 would be, and we'll actually locate Article 33 next to Article 29 immediately after, but this would authorize borrowing for the replacement of the existing turf field. And again, funding source would be the cell revenue and rental fees, and we have a proposal to present to you probably as early as next week. This is something we're working on with school administration and the Parks Commission.
So is this another artificial turf field?
This is replacement of the
regular-
existing artificial turf field.
Yeah, but it would be artificial.
Yes.
It's not sod.
Yeah. Mhm. Article 34, decommissioning of the high school.
So we have to vote to do that?
I don't know. I just made a note. I think that might be, I'm not sure.
Not that I wouldn't vote for it, but I just thought that was part of the thing we already voted for in the whole project. So.
Yeah.
It is an architectural gem. I don't know if I want to really destroy it.
I think that's all going to be taken care of under Article 7.
Okay.
And then the last one right now is authorization for easements for the Summer Street construction project. There may be others that are coming in at this point, not that we're aware of, but again, the warrant is open until a week from this Thursday.
Any questions, comments? Okay, so let's look forward to having fun next week on the wordsmithing of.
Looks like we'll have a shorter town meeting and be able to maintain a quorum.
Maybe. Okay, let's see, minutes, we have minutes from the 1st of March. And I have a warrant for accounts payable in the amount of $35,451.38. Any action file issues?
I have one.
Ms. Bertram?
I want to start by saying this is related to the teen center, and I want to start by saying that I think the teen center is an incredible asset to the community. I am very familiar with the activities that go on there, and I appreciate all of the work it does with our youth. But a concern that I have is on several occasions when I've come to the town hall during the day, the parking lot is completely blocked off with cones, and it appears to be being used by the teen center, the entire parking lot. And while I appreciate that there's limited land with the teen center, there's also limited parking in the town center. And we constructed that parking lot to address the need of the parking for the entire town center, for both the Council on Aging, for the town hall, and for the teen center. And I've mentioned it to the town manager in the past, as I did today, and I'm just very concerned. And I think that I'm confused as to the ownership. I believe it's owned by the town, and if there's a specific event that's going on and they need additional space, and that's one scenario. But to block it off routinely and to prohibit parking there, I have a concern with that, because I know for myself I couldn't find a parking space. And a lot of our employees are parking behind the town hall. That's not our land. The parking lot across the street is. So I think it's something that we need to address. And while I do appreciate that they have limited land there, I know they have the basketball field, and I wish that there was a great big field there. There is next to Kids Kingdom. I don't know if that's too far, but I do think that we've got to address the parking situation.
I will just say that I know that this has been an issue, and they've been wanting to set up a meeting, and for some reason they haven't with us. So I will work with them to set up a meeting, because they're basically constricted that because of the size of the land, there's not, on a beautiful day to have 70 kids inside that building doesn't afford them a lot of room, and they've been doing this, and yes, they have not had permission from the town to do that. They've done it for certain hours, and I know they're looking to get it clarified as well, so I think we should really set up the meeting and just see what we can do to make everyone, to fit everyone's needs.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, committee reports. Mr. Ebersol.
I'll talk about vacancies. Public Access Committee has 2 vacancies, if anybody is interested in serving on that. And last night at the caucus, the Sewer Commission, there are 2 positions not filled, I believe a 2-year and a 1-year position.
Mr. Alonso.
Cable Advisory, we're announcing vacancies, also has 2 vacancies, and our next meeting is next Monday at 6 p.m. here. And Finance Committee met on Thursday. I was not able to attend. They will be meeting again this Thursday to go over, again, additional departments. I believe they'll be televised again this week, too. And School Building Committee meets next Wednesday. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend, as I will be out of town.
Ms. Bertram.
The planning board met last night. There was, I'm just going to hit the highlights. There were several A&R plans. There was a information meeting, which actually ended up being approved for Walmart. They approved an outdoor display area, which is basically an extension of the area, the parking lot they're already using, but it is a formal approval. There was a public hearing on the zoning, on continuation of the Unitil hearing, and there was a lot of discussion on that. They presented a landscape plan, as well as, and I do have copies of that I'll give for the file, but they presented a landscape plan to the board, and you can just pass it down to Kerry, but if anybody wants to look at it. And then the site development plan, which was approved. So they approved the site water development plan, the site development plan, as well as the landscape plan. There was an issue raised by a member of the Conservation Commission relative to stormwater. He suggested that they look at, apparently at the Conservation Commission meeting, they had suggested that they look at installing storm scepters. Unitil took a pretty hard stance against that because of the cost associated with installing the storm scepters. They indicated that it would be $70,000 to add 2 storm scepters. So there was a conversation back and forth, and members of the planning board ultimately decided to approve the site plan as is. The chair indicated that he wished that this conversation had happened sooner in the process, but to now change the plan to accommodate this, and basically which would be a redesign of the site, would be unfair to the applicant at this point in time. And it was stressed by the applicant that they meet the current regulations, both state and local. So there was discussion and interest on, I think, from members of the planning board that with the work the Stormwater Task Force is doing and the work that the Conservation Commission and the involvement they'll have with that moving forward, that changes will be made to improve the removal of contaminants from stormwater for other sites such as this. I will just note I did speak as a citizen, but made it very clear I was speaking as a citizen. The other things that happened is 1026 Northfield Road, which we just talked about, is the rezoning, and they voted to support that. And really, that is, I think that's everything. They did have the public hearing on all of the articles that are coming before us at town meeting, and site plan approval and off-street parking design standards. There was no one there on behalf of the public to speak, and they did vote to move forward with these articles as drafted. Conservation Commission is meeting tomorrow night, and I was not able to attend the MPO meeting, but I know that Mrs. Luck and Ms. Bidell attended, so they can give that update. One thing on the MPO, however, I will say is that the MPO sub-region representative voting will happen on March 31st at the Bull Run at 6 p.m. And if any members of this board is interested in attending, please let Brad Harris of MRPC know that. I do plan to attend as a nominee for the sub-region 3, which represents Harvard, Lunenburg, and Shirley.
All set? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I did attend the MPO meeting on March 9th. It was a pretty uneventful meeting. They did talk about tip day when they review projects on the current tip and consider any realignment. That will be on 4/14. So the next MPO meeting will be on 4/20, so they can share and discuss the results of that tip day. The next school committee meeting will be on March 16th, tomorrow night. The ZBA meets 3/23. The Stormwater Task Force met on Thursday, March 10th. We began to divide the 6 areas of focus for the new permit among the members, and so we're going to try to have different areas of concentration. We ordered rain barrels, which will be purchased through a grant the town manager has obtained, and they'll be sold at cost to residents. Our next meeting will be 3/24. This morning I attended a 319 grant information session with Jane Pierce, the grant administrator. She's going to meet separately with task force members on March 23rd. We are also setting up a meeting with Roger Brooks of the Leominster DPW so they can show us the results of their stormwater efforts and hopefully give us some guidance.
Great. The capital Planning Committee is done with their work and will present at the annual town meeting, and the Building Reviews Committee has an article on the annual town meeting warrant to ask for that to ask for an appropriation for the market analysis. So I'll have no further reports on either of those committees till after the town meeting. The town manager, have any reports or?
I do not.
Alrighty. We will next meet on the 22nd of March. Are there any comments from the public? Any closing comments from the board?
I was remiss, since we're talking vacancies, that the Finance Committee has 2 vacancies. So one of them long-term. So anybody who is interested in helping, now you don't even have to worry about helping with the budget at this time because it's kind of done. So it's a good time to get it in the end and learn the end cycle of the budget.
That's true. Alrighty, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody. See you next
Aye.
week.